Get started. Welcome, everyone. So thank you for joining this session. Big thank you to our speaker, David Bettenbaugh from NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. We're going to open up with just two quick poll questions, and then I'm going to hand it over to David to share his screen, and he's going to walk us through this tool. So if this works as it should, hopefully all of you were here before and are familiar with Poll Everywhere. You can hop on, or if you still have your browser window open, you should be able to answer this poll here. We want to get a sense of who is in the room with us today. If you missed the instructions, they're right there at the top of the screen. You can join in a web browser or respond via text. So I'll give folks a minute to answer here. I'm realizing I should be participating via text. See. Oh, I see two more B's and another C to add to the list. Great. Very ready. Just a few more seconds to weigh in here. So David, hopefully that gives you an idea who we have in here. We've got a lot of government folks, nonprofits. Some of us are just uncategorizable as other. I love that. Yes, and some of us do represent multiple of these, so it's hard to choose just one. Good point, Robin. Great. Okay, we're gonna move on to our next one, so I can give David as much time as possible. Thank you all for that input there. And then this next question is pretty simple. We want to know, how familiar are you with this tool? Have you never even heard of it? That's why you're here. Maybe you've heard of it, but you haven't really used it. You've used it once or twice, or like David, you're an expert in it. All right. Well, any final answers come in? It looks like, David, you're probably the only expert here. So looks like this was a good tool to pick today to introduce to this audience. I know everybody is excited to see how it works. So with that, if you are ready, I will turn it over to you and let you should have permission to screen share. I will stop my screen. If you don't have permission or no problems, I will fix it.
I think it's looking good. Here we go. Thank you, Sarah.
Yep.
Can you see my screen now?
I see it.
Excellent. Okay, well, we can get rolling. A quick question, though, just for logistics and timing. I see we're starting a little bit later than intended, so should I compress the presentation a little bit and Q&A a little bit?
Yeah, we'll take a little less time for Q&A.
Okay.
Fuck, I can't believe I dropped this thing.
It'll be okay. All right, thank you everybody for joining me. And I am a senior geospatial analyst with NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. So I work on a lot of developing and maintaining and creating data for a lot of our products, and including the one that we're going to talk about today. Before I get into talking about the Coastal County Snapshots, I did notice that a grand majority of you have never even heard of it. So that's great. I have an opportunity to introduce you to one of our recently rebuilt and kind of flagship tools. But first, speaking to the Digital Coast website, which is where we are right now, it's how we'll access the tool. This, if you read just beneath the title there, it says dive in to get data, tools, and trainings that communities need to address coastal issues. So this was designed to support coastal management community. It provides data, tools, training as well, and everything you need to really make the data useful. It's really a treasure trove of resources, so it's worth exploring if you've not had a chance to do so already, or if you are not familiar with this resource. As I said, it's designed for the coastal management community, coastal community. So anybody who does any work that focuses upon the coast is likely to find something that's going to be useful for them here. So as I said, we're going to navigate to our tool that we're highlighting today, which is the Coastal County Snapshots. And so we can just type in a keyword in the search bar, and here we go. And we'll pull it up. Excuse me. This is what we call the tool page for this particular resource in the Digital Coast. And just want to give you a little bit of background before I dive into it. This tool has been around for quite a while. It was actually one of the first things I started working on when I came to the office in 2011. And it was really initially a very simple tool. You'd go in and you'd pick a county, you'd pick one of the 3 themes that were available, and then you get a 2-page county level report with easy to understand graphics and charts and statistics for your county on that particular theme. And then you could print that out as a handout. And it was really the target audience were elected officials, but also it was, for anybody who wanted to use the handouts for communication. And the themes were wetland benefits, flood exposure mapper, and marine dependent economy. But and so it was a great starting point for someone to learn about a topic or a theme. But we had lots of things a lot of changes that we wanted to make. We had to rebuild the back end. So we took all of that opportunity to rebuild the tool, which was released in January of last year. So we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary of this new tool. But here in this tool page, sorry, you can peruse and get a little bit of more information, and then you can click this launch button to get into the tool. And so right here in the tool at the top, you can see you get a little blurb about what this is going to provide for you. You'll see that we have a geography search here. And before we do that, I just want to scroll down and highlight a few things. First of all, this graphic is meant to tell you that this is a responsive design, so it'll work on smartphones and tablets. And then also, if we scroll down further, some pretty impressive statistics down here. There are snapshots for 850 counties across 37 coastal states and territories. There are 4 snapshots currently within the tool, and those are split into 2 different series. And so we'll get into that right now, in fact. So we get back up to our geographic search bar, and you can type in a state. So in this, and you can see that it has autocorrect. So I started typing Connecticut, and it's provided a list of the counties that actually have snapshots in this tool. So, or you can conversely, you can type in the county's name directly, and it'll pop up for you with autocorrect or autofill rather. So once we're on this page, this is the select a snapshot page. You'll see a card for each of the snapshots that are available for the county that you've picked. Not all counties have all snapshots, but this particular Middlesex County does have all 4. And so they're also color coded. You can see the green are according to series, green for the economic series and blue for the flood series. I'll just speak to these real briefly, and then we'll dive into one of them. So the marine economy, it describes 6 economic sectors that are dependent on the oceans and Great Lakes. So marine economy. The total coastal economy is available for all coastal shoreline counties, and it just describes all economic activity within that county. So jobs and economic activity related to banks, grocery stores, local governments, and everything in between. Then the sea level rise snapshot. It's probably pretty self-explanatory, but it highlights community exposures to sea level rise and inundation. And the last one, the special flood hazard snapshot, that actually shows data about exposures and impacts within the 100-year floodplain. So we'll launch into that. And you'll notice right at the top here, we have just a little blurb about, with this snapshot, and you'll see the first button you can click is the print preview. And so as I described, the first iteration of this tool, it was really just a portal to get yourself to a county level report, right? And so that 2-page handout was still something that we wanted to maintain, and this tool was still very important to our user base. And so this is how you get to the print view. There are really 2 views of the tool. One is kind of the static print view, and the other is the interactive or dynamic view where you can click in the website. So this is the static print view, and you can see that just very concise messaging, some simple graphics that are on the topic, and you can scroll through and check out. It's just broken into these different sections. And this is something that you can download and save as a PDF, and you can print it, or you can email it, or embed it in a report. And we'll back out of here. And all of those sections that we saw in the print view are also available in the interactive view, as I mentioned. I wanted to highlight there's two ways to navigate. So you have these sections where you can click the side panels over here and advance, or you can also scroll. In this case, we'll just move on into our first section. Okay, again, this is focused upon those special flood hazards, so FEMA flood zone exposures. And so this first section is people at risk. And this shows populations within the 100-year floodplain. If you look over here on the right-hand side, we have our simple graphics and a little bit of text, and we focus upon just total population, and then two kind of traditional vulnerable populations. So the population 65 and over, as well as population that is living below the poverty line. And you can see that it's color coded. It's dark blue for outside the floodplain, and light blue for inside the floodplain. And I realize it's a little bit small right now, but I don't think I can do anything about that. And then at the top, we have just a quick statistic of relative to that. So in this case, it's telling us the percent of the land, the county's land area, that it falls within the 100-year floodplain. And then on the left-hand side, you can see just a really concise message. You see it's pretty short because we have very little real estate. Pretty much everything that you see in this dynamic view is ported over into the print view, where we have very little space. And so it forces us to be very concise and thoughtful about our messaging here. But you can see in this case for this county, 14% of the total population, if you hover over it, it'll tell you the total number, which is over 22,000 people actually live inside the FEMA 100-year floodplain. And then if you look over in the people living in poverty, it's even a higher percentage at 19% of the people that are living below poverty that are in the floodplain. We'll move on to the next section. I apologize if I'm speaking quickly. I just want to make sure I can get through as much of this as possible in the time that we have left. The next section focuses on critical facilities, and our critical facilities include schools, police stations, fire stations, and medical facilities. And at the top here, you can see a call out. It tells you the percentage of all of these facilities that are within the floodplain. So for Middlesex, it's 2.5%. And then the risk is well, if we look down here, of course, you can see that it's color coded by the ones that are in and out. I didn't pick a particularly impressive, if you will, county for this display, but it can be significant if you have a couple of critical facilities in the floodplain, because the risk is during a flood event, these facilities could become inoperable, and you have critical services that may be unavailable, right? So it's definitely something worth investigating. A few things I wanted to highlight as we go along. Down here, you have the data sources, and these are hyperlinked. So if you click upon the data source for any of these sections, it'll take you to the authoritative source. Also, if you look here, we have the view map. This is something that we really wanted to add in our updated development of this tool, is just providing a view of the spatial data behind all of the statistics and graphs. And so this is like a heat map. You zoom in, it'll show you kind of a blob of where there's a density of these exposed facilities. It's a little counterintuitive, but we've masked out the areas outside of the floodplain in white. But the facilities that are in the floodplain, you can see, are in solid dots, versus those that are outside are the ones that are in hollow dots. And it's a little bit hard to see here, and kind of provides me an opportunity to show you another feature, which is where you can change the background, right? So if you zoom in a little bit, zoom in a little bit more, then you can see, some of the dots here, but it's still a little bit difficult. But if you see me in the upper right hand corner, this half solid, half hollow circle, you click upon that, it changes to the light background, the light mode, versus the dark mode, and those points pop a little bit more. So some cases it'll help accentuate, or it just might be your preference to have one or the other. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one other thing I want to point out that's really cool. If you can look very, very down, right down here at the very bottom, when it's available, we provide these smart links to other tools. We call this a deeper dive. So it's for a deeper dive into critical facilities. you can go to this tool, which is the Coastal Flood Exposure Mapper. It also has a map that shows critical facilities in the FEMA flood zone, but it looks a little different. I've opened it up and you can see it zooms into the area of interest, and you can zoom in and you can explore and a little bit more. It's a little bit busy here, and you have control over the layers and whatnot. But that is a feature that we have where available in all of these different map sections. Moving on to the next section, which is homes at risk. And so this highlights actual impact. So this is payouts through the National Flood Insurance Program, claims that were submitted through that program, in 5-year windows, right? So from 1991 through 2020. And you can see that there is one year that really skews it all, and that is one window that's going to skews it all, and that's between 2011 and 2015, where you had in this county, 28 million dollars in claims. I mixed up my counties. I meant to actually go through Nassau County for this particular snapshot, where that bar was actually 2 billion. But I think everybody probably knows what that's due to, right? So Hurricane Sandy, the impacts and the claims that were associated with that. So again, this is just based upon actual impacts. You can look over a time frame to see what has happened. And then the next section is being underwater is not a good business plan. It's really a more static section. This is just a custom graphic, and we have one stat. This tells you how many of your businesses in the county are in the floodplain, and then the percentage of those businesses. And again, this is something that can represent potential impacts, especially if you think about places of work are often, representation of your daytime population. In some places, your population kind of shifts a lot during the business hours from where people live to where people work. And so if you have a high percentage of businesses that are exposed, that means that during daytime events, there are a lot of people could be impacted, and also there could be impacts to people's incomes, right? If their businesses are shut down for a period of time. Moving on to our next section, a better future is a greener future. This really is just looking at a breakdown of land cover within the floodplain. Specifically, it's looking at development. So this is using one of our land cover data sets and looking at the man-made features in the floodplain. One thing I'd like to point out, we do have the call out up here at the top. This is actually looking at how much of your floodplain is covered by natural features like marshes and forests and grasslands and such versus man-made features. And you have for this county, we have a really high percentage, which is great. That's what you want your floodplain mostly to be made of is natural features that can buffer and absorb floods, right? You wouldn't want to see a high percentage of a high percentage of the coverage being man-made features, right? Because that means you just have a lot of um, stuff and people exposed. And really, the highlight here is just looking to see. This is comparing between two dates, between 1996 and 2016. And so what we see in the darker, if you see this legend down here, the darker blue is just how much development or how much man-made feature inside the floodplain has been added between 1996 and 2016. Everything in the lighter blue was existed before 1996, and so that just lets you see, how your community is growing. And then if you compare that to outside of the floodplain, are you adding more man-made features inside the floodplain or outside the floodplain? In this case, you can see it's more development comparatively is outside of the floodplain, which is what you would like to see. And then just moving on to the last section, digging deeper section. This provides a link to related tools, data, and trainings. You've got this horizontal navigation. And so if you click on any of, you can, explore these. And if you click on any of them, it'll take you directly into the resource. And then that finishes our tour of our first full snapshot. I think that's the only one we'll have a chance to go in great depth of, but I do want to highlight a few other functions that we've added in here. So if you go look at me, or look at me, if you follow me to the upper right hand corner here, I'll highlight the functionality of some of these icons. The first one is the share URL. I'll click upon that and it gives you a URL. And what's really cool is that will, if you copy that URL and we're going to add it in this toolbar, it's going to take us to the snapshot for that particular county and that particular section, right? So this is where I was when I created it, and I've just opened it here. And so if you wanted to save or share um, a, a link to a particular section for a particular county, that's the way you do it. It's a really useful tool. This question mark is our frequently asked questions. This is how you also can get to the print view that we saw earlier. So just two ways, two doors to get into that. This is the changing the background. And then finally, this section is how you can open up and your selection of snapshots and choose a different snapshot. And then over here, you can change your location. So let's say we wanted to go to Nassau County. I realize our time is getting short, but so that's how you can change your location. And let's say we want to look at the sea level rise snapshot. Um, Sarah, how are we looking on time? Do you want me to just highlight this for another minute or dive into questions?
I was gonna say, if you could do that, we have about 5 minutes, 6 minutes left, and we do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Thank
Well,
you.
what I wanted to point out for the sea level rise snapshot is if we scroll down to the first section, people at risk. That sounds familiar, right? So a lot of this, and same thing, critical facilities. A lot of these sections mirror what we saw in the special flood hazard snapshot, but they're focused upon inundation to the even whole foot increments of sea level rise between 2 feet and 10 feet, right? And so we have graphs and statistics on the exposure as those inundation scenarios increase. I think this is a little bit more um, informative to look at, right? So you can see just this, how the populations, as you would expect, the population, the number of people, the bar chart increases as you go from 2 feet of sea level rise up to 10 feet of sea level rise. And that's based upon data from our sea level rise viewer, which is definitely a flagship tool of our office. And then I think the last thing I want to highlight in this tool, like I said, everything is very similar to what we showed earlier, just looking through a different lens. This last section is unique to the sea level rise snapshot. When is the time to act? And this is based upon the 2017 as well as the 2022 sea level rise technical report um, projections, right? So these are projections of sea level rise based upon different scenarios. And this is, and you can look at a table, and this will help communities understand when these different sea level rise height or level scenarios are going to happen based upon the different scenario projections, right? And so this is going to help a community kind of understand these projections as they are wrestling with some planning horizons, right? Um, and let's see, with that, just to back out, and I'm not going to open up either one of these economic snapshots, just to allow a little bit of time for questions. But please, if you're interested, come check them out, and they are very informative as well.
Yes, thank you, David. This is excellent. I know we asked you to cover a lot in a really short period of time, and I think you did a really admirable job. So thank you. And based on, there's been a lot of comments in the chat. People are really interested in this tool. I wanted to go through just as many questions as we have time for. And
Sure.
one that came up a couple times was questions about how often this gets updated. How often the tool is updated, the data is updated.
Yeah, that's great. And so, very fair question, and it's a bit of a balancing act because one, it's dependent upon resources when we have the staff to do that because we have a lot going on in our office, and the other is based upon when there's kind of a critical mass of data to be updated, right? Our goal is to update every 2 years or so. As I mentioned, we released this in January of last year, so we're coming up with a 2-year mark, and we plan to update within this fiscal year. Our fiscal year ends at the end of September. So, by the end of September of 24, we hope to have updates rolled out. But we're also, part of this was I did I did all of the flood series stuff. But I had a colleague who was working on the economics team. And he did, those respective snapshots. He's no longer with our office, and the position hasn't been filled, right? So it's just also a resources constraint as well.
For sure. Another question that came up a couple times was about whether or not there's any information in here related to people who might need mobility assistance in flood zones.
There's not. No, that's a great point, and that's something that I'll jot down and we should consider. But the short answer is no, but it's a good idea.
Fair enough. Okay. We have less than a minute left, so I'm about to close the breakout rooms. I'm trying to see if there's another quick question we could ask you here. Someone asked if you were able to pinpoint specific cities or locations.
As far as the statistics are just, they're created at the county level, right? And so, in that regard, no, you can get into the maps and explore a little bit more at the sub county level. And I would even recommend that coastal flood exposure mapper tool that I highlighted. I think would be even a better resource for looking at a community level. And yeah.
Well, thank you. And like I said, there were a lot of questions in the chat, so we were going to make note of them all and maybe follow up with you. And maybe this is an indication to us that maybe we'll work with you and see if you join us for a longer training on this tool. Because like I said, there was a lot of interest in it and notes that I think it would be helpful to folks in this region, combined with other resources and tools, of course. But again, this one is on our resource hub. But yeah, a couple of people mentioning that they weren't even aware of this, and so they're excited to know about it. And I'm sure as folks get in and play with it and explore, maybe they'll have more questions. So, and I'll just note that we can share, if you're okay with it, share your email out in the meeting follow-up, so folks could reach out. And yeah, I see some things in the chat, and I know we're about to get kicked back to the main room. So thank you so much, David. Really
Yeah, and absolutely. Feel free to share my email, and if you receive the email or have a question, feel free to reach out. I always love to communicate directly with people.
Thank you.